brother took me to court over our grandmother's bakery. He wanted the building, the equipment, the name on the sign, everything she'd spent 40 years building. His lawyer was confident, mine was terrified. I told my lawyer to stand down. My grandmother came to the United States from Oaxaca in 1979 with $40 and a recipe for pan dulce that her mother had written on the back of a church bulletin. She settled in San Antonio, Texas, rented a tiny storefront on the east side, and opened what she called simply La Casa Dulce. It wasn't fancy. The floors were uneven. The display case had a crack down one side that she covered with a strip of decorative tape. But people lined up every morning, and they came back every afternoon, and on Sundays they brought their children, and their children brought their children, and for 4 decades that bakery was the heartbeat of our family. My grandmother died 2 years ago in October. She left the bakery to me. Not to my brother, not to my parents, to me. She left it to me because for 7 years I was the one who showed up. I started working there when I was 19, just on weekends, helping behind the counter while I took classes at UTSA. But I fell in love with it. The smell of the oven at 4 in the morning, the way the pan dulce had to proof overnight, the regulars who came in so often I knew their orders before they opened their mouths. After graduation, I didn't take the marketing job I'd been offered downtown. I went full-time at the bakery. My grandmother was 73 and her knees were going and she needed help. I was there. My brother was not. He was in Dallas, working in finance, living in an apartment with a gym and a rooftop pool, coming home for Thanksgiving and occasionally Christmas. He loved our grandmother. I'm not saying he didn't, but loving someone from a distance and building something alongside them every single day are 2 different things. My grandmother knew the difference. She updated her will 3 years before she died. She left the bakery, the building she owned outright, the equipment, the brand, the name to me. She left her home to my parents. She left my brother a sum of money she'd kept in savings, a number I was never told, but that my parents later described as substantial. My brother did not take this well. I found out about the lawsuit on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of shaping conchas when my phone rang. It was my attorney, a woman I'd hired 6 months earlier to help me transfer the deed and handle the business paperwork after probate cleared. She told me my brother had filed a claim contesting the will. He alleged that our grandmother had not been of sound mind when she updated the estate documents. He alleged undue influence, meaning he was claiming I had manipulated a 70-year-old woman into cutting him out. I set the phone on the counter and stared at the dough in my hands. Undue influence. That was the legal term he used for 7 years of my life. My attorney told me we had a strong case. Our grandmother had signed the updated will in front of a notary and 2 witnesses, both of whom were neighbors with no connection to our family. Her doctor at the time had noted no cognitive decline. She had been sharp, opinionated, and completely herself until the last 6 months of her illness, and even then she'd been clear-headed more often than not. My attorney said we should file a counter motion and push back hard. I said I needed to think. My brother and I had a conversation that week, one of the only real ones we'd had in years. He was calmer than I expected. He told me he understood that Grandma had meant to provide for me, but that the bakery was a family legacy and it wasn't right for one person to own it outright. He said he deserved a share. He said our grandmother had been lonely in her last years and I had taken advantage of that loneliness, whether I meant to or not. I didn't yell. I wanted to. Instead, I asked him one question. Have you read the full will? He said yes. He'd had his attorney review it. I said, okay. I didn't say anything else. I had read the full will too. Every page, every exhibit, every attached document. I had spent hours with my attorney going through it after probate. I knew something about that bakery that apparently neither my brother nor his attorney had bothered to look into very carefully. I called my attorney the next day and told her I wanted to change our approach. Instead of fighting the will contest, I wanted to let it proceed. I wanted to consent to the transfer. I wanted to let my brother have what he was asking for. She was quiet for a long time. You want to give him the bakery, she said. I want to let the process play out, I said. I want to consent to the claim and let the court grant the transfer. She told me that was my right, but she strongly advised against it. She said I was giving up a significant asset over a claim that had almost no merit. She said I was letting him win a fight he didn't deserve to win. I said, I know, let's do it anyway. The weeks before the final hearing were strange. My brother seemed almost guilty. He'd call occasionally, make small talk, ask about the bakery like he was trying to convince himself he was doing the right thing. My parents stayed out of it, which was their version of taking sides. The regulars at the bakery could tell something was off. Mrs. Fuentes, who'd been coming in every Saturday for 22 years, held my hand over the counter one morning and told me she hoped things worked out. I thanked her and gave her an extra concha. The night before the hearing, I sat at the kitchen table in the apartment above the bakery, my apartment, the one that came with the building, and I went through the documents one more time. There it was, the small business loan. In 2019, my grandmother had taken out a loan against the building to replace the entire commercial kitchen, new ovens, new proofing racks, new refrigeration units, new hood system, the whole thing. The cost had been $87,000. The loan was structured over 15 years at a fixed rate. At the time of her death, the outstanding balance was $61,400. That loan was attached to the property. Whoever owned the bakery owned the debt. There was also the equipment lease, a separate agreement for the display cases and the point-of-sale system, 18 months remaining at $640 a month, and the building insurance, which had a rider tied to a commercial liability policy, the premiums of which had been structured around my operating the business continuously. A transfer of ownership would trigger a full policy review, which my insurance agent had already warned me could result in significantly higher premiums for a new owner with no documented operational history in the food service industry. I had known about all of this for months. My attorney had walked me through every line item when we did the probate transfer. I had budgeted for it, planned around it, incorporated it into the business projections I'd quietly been building since my grandmother got sick. My brother's attorney had not mentioned any of it in the filing. Not once. The hearing was a Tuesday morning downtown, a small courtroom on the 4th floor of the Bexar County Courthouse. My brother was there with his attorney, a man in a very good suit who shook my hand with the confidence of someone who believed he had already won. My attorney sat next to me and said nothing. The judge reviewed the consent. My brother's attorney presented the claim. I sat quietly. Then the judge asked if I wished to make a statement before the transfer was entered. I said yes. I asked the judge if I could submit a document into the record, a financial disclosure I'd prepared with my accountant. It listed every debt and obligation currently attached to the bakery property, the loan balance of $61,400, the equipment lease totaling $11,520 in remaining payments, the potential insurance adjustment estimated between $4,000 and $9,000 annually for a new operator, and the outstanding property tax installment of $3,200 due in February. My brother's attorney leaned over and said something quietly into his client's ear. My brother's face changed. The judge reviewed the document. She asked my brother's attorney whether his client had been made aware of the encumbrances attached to the property prior to filing. The attorney said, and I will never forget this, we were aware the property had a mortgage history. The judge looked at him over her glasses. A mortgage history, she repeated, is not the same as an active loan balance of $61,000 with 11 years remaining. The attorney asked for a recess. During the recess, my brother came and sat next to me in the hallway. His attorney had gone to make a phone call. We sat side by side on a bench the color of old mustard, and for a few minutes neither of us said anything. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked. I thought about that for a moment. You didn't ask, I said. You asked for the bakery. You didn't ask what came with it." He rubbed his face with both hands. He'd flown in from Dallas the night before, and he looked like he hadn't slept. "I didn't know about the loan," he said. "I know you didn't." "You knew I didn't know?" "I didn't answer that." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "So what happens now?" "That's up to you," I said. "If you want to proceed, I'll consent. The bakery transfers, and the debt transfers with it. You'll need to qualify with the lender for an assumption or refinance the loan, and with the current rates, that's going to be significantly higher than what Grandma locked in. You'll need to take over the equipment lease. You'll need to get your own commercial insurance policy, and you should budget for a higher premium since you don't have operational history." He stared at the floor. "Or," he said, "or you withdraw the claim, I keep operating the bakery, you keep the money Grandma left you in savings, and we figure out how to be siblings again." His attorney came back down the hallway. My brother stood up, and they conferred quietly near the window. I watched the pigeons on the ledge outside and thought about the way my grandmother used to hum while she worked. An old melody I could never identify, something she'd brought with her from home. When they came back into the courtroom, my brother's attorney informed the judge that his client wished to withdraw the claim. The judge granted it. We went to the bakery afterward, my brother and me, without the attorneys. I made coffee and put out some of the things I'd baked that morning. He sat on a stool at the counter the way he used to when we were kids, visiting Grandma after school. "I shouldn't have filed," he said. He was looking at his coffee. "I was angry. I thought it was unfair." "I know," I said. "You let me walk all the way to a courthouse before you told me what I was actually getting." "Yes." He looked up. "That's kind of cold." I thought about that. Maybe it was. Maybe there was a version of me who would have called him 6 months earlier and explained everything quietly and saved us both the trouble. But I had tried to talk to my brother for 2 years about the bakery, about our grandmother, about what it meant to be part of something that required daily effort and presence. He had not wanted to hear it. He had wanted the asset without understanding what an asset actually is. Sometimes people need to see the whole ledger. "The kitchen equipment is worth seeing," I said instead. "Grandma replaced everything 4 years ago. The ovens are incredible." He laughed, a short, surprised sound. It was the most genuine thing I'd heard from him in a long time. He asked if he could come in sometime and watch how things worked. Not to interfere, not to claim ownership. Just to understand what she had built. I said yes. He came back the following Saturday at 5 in the morning. He stood in the corner of the kitchen, out of the way, and watched me shape the dough. He didn't say much. At some point he put on an apron and I let him score the tops of the conchas, imperfectly, the way all of us had done the first time. Mrs. Fuentes came in at 8, same as always. She looked at my brother behind a counter and raised her eyebrows. "Family," I said. She nodded like that explained everything, because it did. What I learned through all of this, and what I think my grandmother already understood when she wrote her will the way she did, is that ownership is not a gift. It is not something you receive and then possess without consequence. It is a commitment, a structure of obligations, a set of responsibilities that come attached to whatever it is you're claiming. The building, the equipment, the name, the customers, the debt, the early mornings, the years when you break even, and the years when you don't. It all comes together. My grandmother didn't leave me the bakery because she loved me more than my brother. I don't believe that. She left it to me because she knew I understood what I was taking on. She'd watched me take it on for 7 years. She'd seen me choose it over and over every morning when it would have been easier to choose something else. That was what the will reflected, not favoritism, evidence. My brother and I talk more now than we did before any of this happened. He calls on Sunday mornings sometimes, around the time the first trays come out of the oven. I put the phone on the counter and we talk while I work. He's asked me questions about the business, real questions about margins and suppliers and what it costs to maintain the equipment. He's learning, slowly, imperfectly, the way we all do. The bakery turns 39 this year. We're planning something for the 40th. A small celebration, a few tables outside, music maybe. My brother said he wants to be there. I told him to come early. There's a lot of prep work. I keep thinking about the morning my brother stood in that kitchen with flour on his hands, scoring conchas for the first time. Imperfect cuts, uneven spacing, the same way all of us did it the first time. There was something in that moment that felt more honest than anything that had happened in a courtroom. I didn't win because I was clever. I want to be careful about that. What happened at the Bexar County Courthouse wasn't a strategy I'd engineered to humiliate my brother. It was simply the result of years of choices, his and mine, finally becoming visible in the same room at the same time. He had chosen distance. I had chosen to show up. And when the moment came to reckon with what those choices actually meant, the numbers in a financial disclosure did that work more plainly than any argument I could have made. That's the part I've sat with the longest, the idea that our actions accumulate quietly, without fanfare, and then one day the ledger opens and everything is just there. What you built, what you neglected, what you understood, what you never bothered to learn. My grandmother understood this. She didn't write her will the way she did out of spite or favoritism. She wrote it as a record of what she had witnessed. 7 years of early mornings. 7 years of me choosing that bakery when I could have chosen something easier. The will didn't create that reality, it just reflected it. I think about integrity the way she lived it, not as a rule you follow when people are watching, but as a daily practice that either compounds or erodes depending on what you do when no one's keeping score. She ran that bakery for 40 years without cutting corners on the dough, without shortchanging the customers who couldn't afford much, without pretending the hard days were easy. That was her character. And I learned mine by standing next to hers every morning for 7 years. The intelligence piece, the part where I knew what my brother didn't know about the loan, the lease, the insurance, that didn't come from being smarter than him. It came from paying attention, from reading documents carefully, from asking my attorney questions that felt tedious and unimportant at the time but turned out to matter enormously. Understanding the full picture of something before you claim it. That's not a trick. That's just the work of being a serious person. And then there's the part that's harder to talk about, the staying, the not leaving when it got difficult. When my grandmother's knees got bad and the equipment needed replacing and the margins were thin, and I could have taken that marketing job and had a normal life with normal hours. My brother assumed I had stayed because I had no better options. That's not true. I stayed because I decided to, over and over, every morning. I made the same decision. That kind of persistence doesn't announce itself. It just shows up and keeps showing up until one day it becomes the whole story. I told my brother to come early if he wants to be at the 40th anniversary. There's a lot of prep work. He said he would. I believe him this time.